Hello and welcome to Global Eye. The coronavirus pandemic that has claimed over 87,000 lives is bringing nations together. Prime Minister Modi and US President Donald Trump, in their phone conversation on the 4th of April, decided to deploy the full strength of the Indo-US partnership to fight COVID-19. India and US have been in regular touch at the level of foreign ministers, foreign secretaries as well. After a request from the US President, India decided to lift the ban on the export of anti-malarial drug hydroxychloroquine. 3 factories in Gujarat would be supplying this medicine to the United States. To get a sense of how the two nations are collaborating, we're joined by Catherine Hadda, former US diplomat and consul general to India. Catherine, thank you very much for speaking to CNBC TV 18. What do you make of all these high-level conversations between India and United States over the last few days? And when India and United States say they will be deploying the full strength of the partnership to fight COVID-19, what does that imply?
Well, I think, first of all, Namaskar. Thank you very much for having me on your program. It's a pleasure to speak with you today. I think it's a very good sign that our leaders are engaged, our foreign ministers are engaged, and, we're also engaging at a whole raft of other levels, including our health authorities. So all this speaks volumes for the very positive direction of the U.S.-India relationship. We'd like to see this continue, and I think we could in many different directions beyond this immediate pandemic. There's going to be a whole raft of economic recovery questions that come out of this, and economic resiliency questions. And I think we're natural partners in that as well. And it speaks to the fact that for the past several years, we've been building up steadily our bilateral relationship on a whole range of important issues. And I think we're seeing the fruits of that now.
Right. When you spoke about the economic roadmap ahead, India and United States have also been speaking about an economic recovery. What do you think would be some of the areas that India and United States should focus on in the days ahead?
Well, that's an interesting point. When the president traveled to India in February, it just seems like a lifetime ago right now because, it was even hard for us to get a limited trade agreement in order. What I'm hopeful for is this is going to allow both countries, governments, businesses to put us on a footing that will look at things more systemically and more strategically. We're going to both be facing economic downturns. You were already slowing down a bit before this happened. We've had a very sudden shock with at least 16 million unemployed people almost overnight. So, the opportunity is that the synergies that we already enjoy in areas like health, where I'm not the only one rooting for these U.S.-India teams who are developing coronavirus vaccines. It would be great if they would succeed. Diversifying pharmaceutical supply chains, how do we'll probably be producing more APIs ourselves. How do we prevent shocks on that? But then we could extend it to questions of economic resilience during times like this. What is the role of e-commerce, for example? Is that going to allow both countries to take a look again at the importance of digitizing small businesses? We have a digital divide in this country. You do. So our IT sectors are already so entwined that I can't help but believe our companies are going to be looking at this, and the opportunities are really there.
Okay. Right. And Catherine, what do you make of the threat that came from Donald Trump recently when he said that if India does not allow the export of hydroxychloroquine, then there could be retaliation?
Yeah, well, I think rather than focus on one statement, you should look at the warm exchange of tweets that happened yesterday between our president, your prime minister. I think both of them want to keep the relationship on a high note, a productive note. Your prime minister was very accommodating, to the request. I'm not going to speculate on what was actually said, when, to whom. I think the outcome is what we should be, looking at. And I think the potential for the positive exchanges, are there. I would want to add there's also a danger, it's a very real danger, that what will happen instead as both countries are facing, as I say, economic downturns, there are going to be a lot of domestic pressure to focus on our own manufacturing, our own people, which is natural. We're also going to be, of course, during a presidential race, perhaps, that might put a little bit of rigidity or distraction, on our negotiators' side. But I think it would be a shame to let this opportunity go because I think what we're seeing is a huge potential in the U.S.-India relationship. So I'm thinking we'll probably see both an increase in some kinds of protectionism, but also hopefully a constructive conversation on many of the issues that I just mentioned, and probably more. You know, supply chains cover a great variety of industries. Aerospace, for example, as I saw in Hyderabad, you know, there's just a lot of discussion that should go on. This won't, unfortunately, be the last pandemic, and it definitely won't be the last supply shock. So what are the kinds of positive conversations and movement that we can see coming out of this?
Yeah. And my final question would be, what do you make of Donald Trump's decision to review association and funding to the WHO? Do you think that's appropriate at this stage to undermine the role that WHO is playing?
I think it's perfectly appropriate to question some of the WHO's actions in this pandemic. I don't know what caused some of the statements, some of the actions, but it's a tremendously important global body. I think there is some indication it's been politicized over the years. You know, one evidence of that is, why is Taiwan not in the WHO? Why can't it participate in the WHO? That's a political issue between China and Taiwan, but it's, as we see, has global health consequences. So I think it's very legitimate to look at this. That's not to say the WHO or China is responsible for our own preparedness or lack of preparedness. We have to look at that too. But I think it's very possible. I want to add, though, I don't think we should shun China. You know, I think we can call them into account without, you know, cutting them off in a range of areas. I really hope this doesn't escalate. A destabilized China, a weaker China is not really in anyone's interest. You share a border with China. You know, we have a lot of economic interconnectivity. We can't cut it off tomorrow. It's in no one's interest to do that. So I'm hoping we can channel these discussions in a positive direction. And I think that's another area that the United States and India can work on together very productively to keep that conversation going, but keep it in a very positive direction.
Absolutely. And I think India and US have decided to be in regular touch. Catherine, thank you very much for speaking to CNBC TV 18 and putting those recent conversations between India and the United States at the highest level in perspective for our viewers. Thank you very much. Remember, the United States has reported more than 425,000 COVID-19 cases and over 14,000 deaths. UK, on the other hand, has seen over 65,000 cases and over 7,900 deaths. The country's Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, who is himself suffering from coronavirus, had to be admitted to the ICU earlier this week. Sanjay Suri joins us from London to tell us how the Prime Minister is doing now.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson is on the path to recovery, which means he should be back in office reasonably soon to face some tough questions about his role, both personally and as Prime Minister. Personally, he met a lot of coronavirus positive people and then refused to get himself tested. He continued to meet people following that, and questions have been asked about his sense of responsibility in doing so. And these questions are going to get louder once he is restored to good health. Also, as Prime Minister, he did not enforce a lockdown when people were demanding it, and only later, and some say too late, he did this when a whole battery of scientists demanded it, pointing to dire scenarios if he did not act in time. Further, there will be serious questions about the economy. Chancellor Rishi Sunak has put in £350 billion into the economy, of which 200 billion came at a stroke from the Bank of England. But all that is not going to be enough. The government is looking for further overdrafts from the Bank of England. There will be a limit how much the Bank of England can provide, and a limit clearly to how much quantitative easing it could resort to. So at many different levels, a lot of serious questions waiting now for Boris Johnson.
Thank you very much, Sanjay, for joining us with that quick update. Now, back in India, the UK High Commission is working round the clock to evacuate thousands of British nationals. Speaking to CNBC TV 18, Jan Thompson, UK's acting High Commissioner, spoke about cooperation with India and how her own country is fighting the pandemic. Listen in.
Yeah, thank you. I think he's doing very well. He's still unwell, but he's on the road to recovery. He was moved yesterday evening from intensive care back onto the ward. He's in extremely good spirits, and I know that he's really keen to get back to work. It was heartwarming to see all the messages of support and well wishes from around the world for the Prime Minister, including, of course, from Prime Minister Modi. Those well wishes were very much appreciated.
Right. There is a big operation that every mission in India is undertaking, and that is evacuating their citizens. How many British nationals are there in India right now? And by soon, would you be able to evacuate all of them?
Well, there are many, many thousand British nationals in India at the moment. Of course, many British nationals have chosen to make India their home and they live here. So they're not looking to leave. But there are also many British travellers, tourists or short-term visitors who have found themselves stranded here and are now looking to go home. We think maybe it could be as many as 20,000 British travellers who are looking to go back to the UK. So we are doing our best to help them to do that. We've already put on a number of charter flights to allow them to travel back from Goa, from Mumbai and from New Delhi. By the end of the weekend, 7 of those flights will have gone out. And then just today, I was able to announce a further 12 charter flights for British nationals going back from airports across India to the UK over the course of the next week. So I hope that by the end of that batch of flights, we will have been able to take about 5,000 or so Brits back home.
Okay.
It's a big operation. It's a big challenge. It's a lot to organise, but we've had great support and assistance from the Indian authorities here. Very grateful for that. So doing our best to get people home as quickly as we can. We know people are impatient. They want to get back. So we're doing that as fast as we possibly can.
So tell us about the cooperation between India and UK right now. Is the UK also sourcing essential medicines, including hydroxychloroquine from India?
Yeah, we've had great cooperation from the Indian government, also from state governments and local authorities on the repatriation effort, as I said, to try and get British travellers home, but also, as you refer to, also in terms of sourcing essential medicines from India. And just this week, we were really pleased that the Indian government gave their approval to the export of paracetamol to the UK. We were really keen to keep that supply chain open, and that kind of cooperation is really critical in the fight against coronavirus, COVID-19.
Right.
And I think UK and India have a great track record of tackling global challenges together, and that's just one example of that. Great to be working together on these issues.
Talking about the COVID spread in the UK, there have been over 60,000 confirmed cases, over 7,000 deaths. What measures is the UK taking to stop community transmission and curtail the spread?
Yeah, so I think the UK is doing its utmost, like all countries around the world, to try and confront coronavirus. We're being guided by the best scientific evidence and, of course, by the World Health Organization. And the situation back in the UK, it's a lockdown situation that we've had there for a couple of weeks now, as in so many countries around the world. So people are staying in their homes. They're only going out to conduct essential business or to buy food supplies, or if they're key workers in key areas that need to keep going. So people are trying to stay home. They're trying to respect social distancing, as in so many other places. And the British government has tried to bring a real package of fiscal and monetary support behind that effort, because we know how much that impacts people's well-being, their jobs, their welfare, and of course is a hit to the economy.
Right.
So a big package of fiscal and monetary support, a lockdown, and of course a lot of effort going into the search for a vaccine. A lot of work going on. The British government has announced a major package of support, over 500 million British pounds, to fight coronavirus, and joined the effort that other countries are also part of, looking for a vaccine, because that is ultimately the way out of this.
And is the lockdown all set to be extended?
Well, I think it's too early to say that. So the lockdown's gone on for a couple of weeks so far. Early signs suggest that the measures put in place are having an impact, but I think it's too early to say conclusively. So the British government is going to be keeping those measures under review to remain guided by the science at all times, and I think just to see when it will be possible to lift it. So there's no immediate decision coming on that, but obviously keeping it under review at all times.
All right, that was Jan Thompson, Acting High Commissioner of the UK to India. And not just US and UK, India is providing HCQ and paracetamol to 25 countries. On that note, we take a break, but when we return, we get you exclusive conversations with Brazil's ambassador to India, Andre Lago, and Australia's High Commissioner Designate, Barry O'Farrell.